Hi and welcome to Anchor Point. I'm Dr Aly Norman and this is another podcast on families after brain injury. This week is Mental Health Awareness Week and the theme is moving more for mental health. Many of the family members that we work with on Anchor Point have discussed the impact that supporting a person with brain injury can have on their mental health. So we really felt this was an important awareness week to engage with. I'm really pleased to say that I'm joined today by Dr Claire McDonald. She's a principal clinical psychologist in neuropsychology, and she's going to talk to us about the specific use of nature for mental health. Welcome, Claire. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
So could you start by telling the listeners a little bit about yourself and about the private work that you do?
Yeah, no problem. So as you mentioned, I'm a principal clinical psychologist working in neuropsychology. So I work part-time in independent practice across the Northwest, supporting individuals and families who've experienced a range of neurological conditions. But I'm also the co-director of a not-for-profit organisation called Neuro in Nature that was set up last year.
Okay, so can you tell us a little bit more then about what Neuro in Nature does?
Yeah, so Neuro in Nature was kind of born out of myself and my colleagues' recognition that for us as individuals, spending time in nature felt incredibly helpful, but also during the sort of COVID, post-COVID social distancing thing, we were also spending a lot more time in the outdoors with our clients, and we were just observing some really helpful changes in terms of their emotional regulation and engagement in the sessions. So this prompted us to both train as forest therapy practitioners. And so Neuro in Nature was born with the aim of integrating neuropsychological information and support with nature connection, really. So what we do is offer neuropsychologically informed nature connection sessions. So we primarily use compassion focused therapy as the framework to kind of offer and understand the benefits of the nature connection activities that we're doing. We offer subsidized or free access to information and education sessions for individuals and family members. And again, these are held in accessible local green spaces or parks so that the nature connection element can be woven in. And we're also working with local forest school providers to set up a bit of a regular program of family activity days so that parents who've maybe experienced a neurological condition or TBI can come, their children can come, we'll spend some time separately connecting with nature in different ways, using different activities, and then come back together and spend some nice time connecting as families in nature as well. So that's where we're up to, really.
Wow, that sounds amazing. So, I mean, obviously your work is specifically around working with people with neurological conditions and their families. But could you tell us a little bit more about the use of nature and green spaces to support mental health and well-being more generally?
Yeah, so I suppose, it intuitively feels the case that spending time outdoors, spending time in nature is good for us. Most of us seem to have a strong sense of that. But when we actually dive into the research and kind of look at the neurophysiological benefits of nature, the evidence is really overwhelming. And I suppose that's what Neuro in Nature are really keen to do, really highlight the benefits and the impact of nature connection for individuals and family members living with neurological conditions. So in terms of the sort of background and the beginnings of the research, a lot of it has come from Japan and Korea from back in the 80s. So they were actually moving towards a more tech-based economy. People were spending a lot of time behind screens, and what they noticed were what the government noticed was that there was a rise in health problems, physical and mental health problems. And so they were looking for solutions to to this problem, and they identified the term, or they coined the term forest bathing as the antidote to this. So it doesn't involve nudity, it doesn't involve taking off any clothes. What it means is immersing yourself in the nature. Some people might. Immersing yourself in the nature air and connecting with nature through your senses. And from there was a lot of high quality research looking at the physiological changes associated with spending time in nature, looking at the kind of cognitive benefits and changes, and looking at the mood related changes of time spent in nature. And the evidence is really overwhelming in terms of those benefits. So what they found is that there are positive changes in terms of blood pressure, heart rate, cholesterol levels, stress hormones within the body. People's mood, people tend to feel calmer, more relaxed after time spent in nature. And actually, there's some evidence of kind of reduced inflammation as well, and kind of the promotion of kind of healing proteins within the body. So a lot of that research has focused on the role of, I suppose, these woodland essential oils called phytoncides. So this is actually the trees or the plant's own immune system response. But what the research highlights is that that has a really complementary and beneficial effects on our human immune system response. So there's a bit of a kind of a symbiosis, I guess, between ourselves and the natural world. And that seems to really benefit our physical and mental health. And so within the UK, then the health systems and sort of medical institutions have kind of built on this research and woven nature connection opportunities into hospitals and healthcare settings. So we can see things like gardens, nature views and images on the walls and ceilings in hospitals. And the underpinnings of that research is from that research from Japan in the 80s. So yeah, that's I would say, yeah.
Okay, great. So some really, really strong evidence base then for what we're talking about here. So then feeding down into thinking about family members specifically, how does the exposure to nature particularly help individuals who have family members after someone has had a brain injury?
Yeah, I suppose thinking about the needs of family members after a brain injury and what they might be experiencing, what we're likely, what we know is that this population of people are experiencing, high levels of psychological distress, potentially high levels of social isolation, at risk of burnout. And the impact of that prolonged and heightened stress may be that their own physical health starts to suffer. And so thinking about the evidence and the research around the positive impacts of nature connection, it seems, that this group of people, in particular, would really benefit from being supported, having a good understanding and being signposted to opportunities for nature connection, or at least having the opportunity to discuss how they can weave nature connection, a bit more into their day, just in terms of protecting and buffering themselves from potential physical and mental health problems, but just also, just as another tool in the toolbox to help them navigate, what can be a really challenging and uncertain experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And as we've talked about quite a lot in Anchor Point, obviously there's a shortage of services, so having that access is important. So then thinking about the busy lifestyles that family members have got, they've got huge care burdens, a lot of other commitments that they're trying to juggle, may not necessarily have much time. Do you have any simple tips for how family members might be able to engage more with nature in a way that would be beneficial to them?
Yeah, I think I'd first of all kind of start by saying that nature connection doesn't need to be, a significant piece of exercise or a hike or a marathon or doing any sort of strenuous physical activity in the outdoors. It can be about developing your relationship with nature from where you're starting from. And, you know, nature connection is about the quality moments, not the minutes spent in nature. And so it is about kind of shifting your expectations. It shouldn't feel like a pressure or another thing on the to-do list. To connect with nature, you will still experience the physical and mental health benefits from starting where you're at and just noticing nature a little bit more. So there's some really helpful research actually that's come out of the University of Derby and the Nature Connectedness research group there, and in particular the work of Professor Miles Richardson. So they've actually developed these 5 pathways to nature connection. They're very simple, very flexible. And they can be used by individuals and also organizations and services to help think about how they can support and facilitate better nature connection. So I'll just talk through those 5 pathways now and kind of weave some tips into those. So the first pathway then is connecting with your senses. So then, you know, just slowing down in a very kind of mindful way and just spending some time noticing, what can you see? What can you hear? What can you smell? You know, if you are sort of within reaching distance, what can you touch? You know, or if you're, you know, into herbal teas or whatever, what can you taste? So this, again, you don't have to be in the outdoors to do this. You can observe and appreciate nature from a window, using a house plant in your home, in your own garden, or, you know, just, yeah, you can even, the research highlights that these benefits can be gained from even just looking at pictures or online images of nature scenes as well. So, you know, I would encourage people to just really connect with your senses, noticing the colors, shapes, textures, noticing any odd or interesting details on a tree or the movement of a leaf. Maybe spending a few seconds noticing what they can feel on their skin in the outdoors, the breeze. Again, sound. I absolutely adore the sound of bird song or the sound of rustling trees, any running water. And these are all things that we can so easily miss as we're darting in and out of the house or heading to and from work or running errands. But these are things that we can weave in if we pause and just notice in these moments, or kind of as we're walking along, just take a few moments to listen out or to notice, you know, are there any signs of nature growing through the cracks in the pavement? What are the trees that we can see around them? Is there anything particularly interesting about those? So there are lots of little ways of connecting with your senses and nature that don't have to feel like a burden or an add-on to the demands of someone's day. So then that takes us on to the second pathway, and that's beauty. And again, I think when we slow down and connect with our senses and really kind of observe and notice, we actually really notice and appreciate the beauty of nature. So that might be a particular bird song, or it might be, you know, a beautiful tree that we notice, or a really intense green color that feels quite soothing to us, a beautiful sunset, the stars in the sky. There are so many beautiful aspects to nature that can just feel quite soothing to us. And again, you know, it is just about giving ourselves that opportunity to slow down and to notice and experience those. So that's pathway number 2. Pathway number 3 then, again, and I think this naturally emerges through the other 2, is becoming aware of our emotional response to nature. So again, when we're connecting with our senses, when we're slowing down and kind of noticing what's there, appreciating the beauty, asking ourselves, how are we feeling right now? How do I feel as I'm doing this, as I'm connecting with nature? And for a lot of us, we notice that we feel slower after a little point of time, or that we feel calmer or more relaxed. Some of us feel, you know, full of awe, sort of looking at the wonder of it. And some people might find that some more tricky emotions bubble to the surface when we give when we give ourselves that opportunity to slow down and check in with ourselves. But again, these check-ins can be woven into the fabric of your usual daily experience. It doesn't have to be an additional add-on to that. So yeah, I think especially for family members who are probably so used to squashing down their own emotions, kind of prioritizing the needs of the person with the brain injury, we can neglect our own emotions so easily. And so it is important just to have that little bit of a check-in and a slowing down and a validating of whatever emotion is there. And nature, again, can just be a really helpful resource and tool to help us do that. So then the next pathway then is meaning. So through our histories, our personal stories and our lives, we might have our own narratives and meanings of nature. We might have had a favorite tree to climb when we were younger. We might have had a favorite place to visit as we were growing up, or somewhere that's special to us and our family and nature. And just spending some time thinking about that, reminiscing on those memories, connecting with the feelings associated with those can be helpful. And through the work that Neuro and Nature has done, what we've noticed is that nature can be a really powerful resource for generating really meaningful metaphors and reflections about our own lives in relation to what we're observing in nature. So an example of this might be, a family member who's supporting their loved one might notice or observe a tree that might be a bit damaged or gnarled. Its trees might be a bit disfigured. And they might notice what that tree has gone through. But as well as noticing what the tree has gone through, what the tree has potentially struggled with, they might notice that despite that tree is resilient, that tree is growing, doing the best that it can, that tree is providing for the other plants and sort of wildlife around it. It's providing a home for small animals potentially, but also that tree also needs nurturing and care from the other trees and sort of root systems around it. And so these metaphors that, again, we don't tell people to go out and find these comparisons. They're generated from actually slowing down and noticing what's around us in nature. Can be very helpful metaphors for someone going through an incredibly difficult and challenging situation, and might offer a little bit of a reminder that even though, yes, they have to be the strong one, they have to be the one who kind of provides, that also actually they need support from a community themselves. So it's just really interesting to kind of notice the meanings and the stories and the metaphors that are generated through just becoming more connected with nature.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And then the last pathway to connection then is compassion. So what the research highlights is that the more connected we are in nature, the more we want to care for and protect it. And obviously in kind of the current climate and situation, that's more important than ever. But also we feel good when we are acting in compassionate and helpful ways to nature, in relation to nature as well. So this might be, again, something small as picking up some litter, if we're going for a walk or we're walking, to or from work or home. Or it could be something like spending time creating, a bird feeder for the garden, or, thinking about more sustainable products, or, there are small ways of kind of showing and demonstrating compassion towards nature. And again, that helps us to feel better within ourselves as well. So those are just some small ways of weaving nature connection into the fabric of our daily life. Yeah, so I just really recommend that, people access the resources that are freely available on the Forestry England website, and also the work of Professor Miles Richardson and the Nature Connection Handbook. If people are interested, there are lots of tips and resources available, and I just encourage people to have a look, have a read, and see what works for them in their personal situation.
Fantastic. Thank you, Claire. And we're going to have a link to those resources on the final page of this podcast if anyone's interested in accessing those. Thank you, Claire, so much for joining me today for such an interesting topic. We really hope that everyone at home has enjoyed this podcast, and that you will consider engaging some of the activities that Claire has been talking about today. And remember to join us on YouTube for any of the rest of our information videos and podcasts that we have already, but also look out for other content that we may be producing in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.